For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.
Today on the show, I've got Jake Sorofman. He's the president of MetaCX, a new company focused on outcomes-based approach for managing the customer lifecycle by transforming how suppliers and buyers collaborate and win together. Jake was previously the CMO at Pendo and previously on this show in an earlier date when we did a live podcast. And he was before that chief of research at Gartner. On the show today, we talk a little bit about what it's like to join a company and make the transition from CMO to president, and also amid a global pandemic that we're going through, how he's thinking about building company culture, some of the things that they're doing at their MetaCX. We talk a little bit about the founder of MetaCX, Scott McCorkle, and what the company is doing, what the vision is for the company. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jake. Jake, welcome back to the show. I think,
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah. Last time we talked, you were the CMO at Pendo, and now you're the president at MetaCX. Is that am I pronouncing that right?
That's
MetaCX.
correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So first, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you made the change from CMO to president, which I want to get into in a minute. But why'd you make the change, and what made you interested in joining MetaCX?
Yeah, what we built at Pendo was pretty darn great, and I'm super proud of the team I built and the work we did. And I look back at that experience as really one of the highlights of my career, if not the most important thing I've done. Learned a ton, loved it. And by virtue of that experience, it created new opportunity. And this one was pretty unique. I certainly had interest in taking on more responsibility and sort of exercising different muscles. But even more importantly, it was working with an entrepreneur who I just really, really admire and think very highly of, a guy named Scott McCorkle, who I got to know when I was at Gartner, when I was a Gartner analyst, and he was president of ExactTarget, and then subsequently the CEO of the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And when we started talking, it was just obvious that there was just such a strong match there. And it became one of those moments where you only live once. And in the broad scope of things, you need to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. So here I am.
I love it. And Pendo was, to your point, you had a great time there. That's the closest thing I think to riding a rocket ship that you can get other than working for Elon Musk.
It felt that way. Honestly, I won't lie to you. Like, there is nothing about that experience that didn't feel surreal to me. It was amazing.
Well, you mentioned Scott, so maybe we just talk about Scott for a second. You just mentioned he was the CEO of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. What can you tell me about him and listeners, and what's the relationship like that you're starting to form now as the president and him being the CEO?
Yeah. So when I got to know Scott, this must have been like 8 or 10 years ago, I guess. As I said, he was president at ExactTarget. I was a Gartner analyst. We spent some time together in like an advisory capacity. And he struck me as someone, and I didn't know him super well, but the impression that he made on me was someone who had a formidable intellect and just a really smart visionary, who obviously had an amazing track record and career, and was, despite all that, incredibly humble and low ego and likable and human, and like had all of those very appealing characteristics that you would hope for in someone that you know and spend time with. And that those things could coexist. And I know it's cynical to suggest that they can't or even don't often, but to me, it made an impression, and we stayed in touch. So in this new context, he's a technology guy, he's a product guy. He's also a company builder. He's had an incredible career starting and growing companies. But I've taken on go-to-market and customer-facing responsibilities. So I'm responsible for sales and marketing, customer success, professional services, technical support, where he focuses on product management and engineering and finance and ops and fundraising and board.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. That's a good split too. And I guess a natural question follow on is, how do you feel like the CMO role that you previously were in is prepared you to kind of take on the added responsibilities of president?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think some of it is maybe circumstantial to where we are as a company, earlier stage company. And a lot of the early lift with this company is market development and product market fit and positioning and go to market and launch and demand generation and all the things that I already do and have done throughout my career. The parts that are net new to me around managing, owning the number and managing sales, et cetera, are very familiar because I've been so closely adjacent to it, really sitting at the same side of the table with a CRO or head of sales, because that's what's expected of the modern marketing leader. It's like you live and die by the number in the same respect that salespeople do. Maybe that's a slight overstatement, but there certainly is accountability to driving revenue and understanding the mechanics of the selling motion and a coordinated go-to-market. So it doesn't feel terribly unfamiliar, but it is a bit of a new muscle for me to exercise, new challenge.
I mean, it seems like to your point about where you were sitting before, it seems like a seemingly natural evolution. Maybe that's a little too strongly worded, but
it doesn't feel unfamiliar. It honestly, so far, and I'm only several weeks, 4 weeks into this, it feels like it fits like a glove.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have both joined companies in the middle of a global pandemic. And I'm curious, how are you thinking about the importance of just company culture, your teams, in midst of all the craziness that's swirling around? Not to mention, we still have to get business done.
100%. I mean, a couple of comments on that. The first is, it seems like it's felt like a really productive time personally for me, despite all the weirdness of what's happening right now and the fact that we're not seeing each other, not sitting in the same location. I'm working a lot and I feel pretty productive and engaged. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way. It might be a coping mechanism, but that's the general vibe, is that people are more engaged maybe than they would be in the office. I don't know if that's commonly felt, but that's been my lived experience. In terms of how you build a culture in this environment, it's definitely, you need to be even more intentional. My feeling is that cultures don't happen by accident anyway. You need to be intentional from the beginning. And in terms of the values you care about, how you live those values, how you hire and fire, how you celebrate, how you learn together, like all these things need to be pretty intentional in order to build the sort of company you're trying to build. And in this sort of environment, you need to be even more deliberate and over communicating and finding times for ritual and ceremony and bringing teams together, albeit somewhat awkwardly via Zoom. Like we have every other Friday, we do a happy hour. We call it Forced Fun. And, it's a little awkward. We lean into the awkward. We sit in it together as a team, like everybody else on Zoom. But it's better than nothing. And I think that the point is that we're doing it. And I think that people get it and appreciate it. One fun thing we're doing right now is we have a 100-mile challenge for the entire company to encourage people to go outside and exercise. And every night I log my miles, and we've broken off as teams and created sort of a friendly competition to engage in physical activity.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely outside the box, outside the office, outside the home. I really like that because I don't know about you, but there's definitely a thing that's called Zoom fatigue. I think there's been a couple of days this week where, it's been 6 to 7 hours on Zoom calls, and it's more intense than being in 6 to 7 hours of meetings. And I don't quite understand the dynamic of it, but it's true, I think.
I think it's 100% true. And I made a very similar comment to someone today. And I said, the thing that I think is more taxing about sitting on a Zoom call is it demands more concentration. You need to maintain, your physical proximity to the screen. So you're sitting in a chair all day, tethered to your chair, and eye contact and all those other things. In a meeting, I can get up and walk around. It doesn't feel quite as intense.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Well, I think thanks for sharing the 100-mile challenge and the forced fun concept. I've done those happy hours myself. Let's talk a little bit about MetaCX. What is it, and what are you guys trying to achieve?
Yeah, the idea is pretty big. So the idea is that suppliers and buyers have been for a very long time misaligned around the definition of success, the definition of value. Big part of this is because companies, salespeople get a bit of a bad reputation at times for selling an empty promise, and it isn't necessarily their fault. What happens is after they close the deal, there's sort of this collective memory loss that happens within many organizations as you move into sort of delivering on that promise and then holding yourself accountable to value realized over time. It's just there isn't any rigor around that in most organizations. So it leads to dissatisfied customers. It leads to customer churn. So MetaCX has created a sort of a customer experience layer for the B2B customer lifecycle that allows sales reps to more effectively align with prospects around sort of a shared definition of success from the perspective of what are the outcomes that your customers are trying to achieve. So let's start there. What's the pain or problem you're trying to solve? Let's document it. Let's build the case around that. Use that as the basis for how we close the deal. But then let's also use it as part of the handoff into the onboarding process, into the implementation cycle, into customer success. Now there's a record. There's a history of all of that knowledge around what customers care about. And you're able to track it and organize around it and support it and importantly, measure it. So MetaCX also has a data integration layer that allows you to start to light up those outcomes with live data to actually see to what extent your product or service is moving the needle for your customer. And that way, at renewal time, it's a very, very clear picture of whether you have or haven't achieved goals. There's sort of two bad options that tend to happen within SaaS companies. One is your product isn't delivering value. And the second bad option is that it is, but you just can't see it or prove it. In both cases, it creates doubt. And where there's doubt, there's risk for churn. So that's sort of how we're addressing it.
Got it. It sounds so. I've done in the B2B world. When I say B2B, not SaaS B2B, like you're talking about, or you've worked in as well, is but more like industrial B2B. You know, the chemical companies, those types of folks. And there was this notion. We did a lot of work with clients on quantifying value propositions through the sales process. This sounds very similar, but maybe much more integrated into the actual sales process and the product itself.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think you're nailing it. And even in the world of SaaS, there's plenty of quantifying of value in the sales process. But the problem is, even though a lot of enterprise selling organizations have been trained on value selling frameworks that allow them to ask really smart discovery questions, to identify problems and pains, to attach those problems and pains to create a more persuasive argument to buy, which I think is kind of what you're describing, like quantify the impact. That's helping them sell more effectively, but it's not necessarily helping the customer because after the deal is closed, the thread is often broken. There's kind of that collective memory loss because the handoff is often botched and all that knowledge isn't transferred and much less measured. Like companies aren't going back to those outcomes and saying, hey, how are we doing against those goals? If they are, they're doing it in a very defensive posture, as a mad scramble at the 11th hour, as a way to retroactively paint a picture of value in order to kick save a deal. They're not doing it in any kind of systematic way. And that's what we're trying to enable.
Got it. Okay. And is your primary customer market, is it other software companies? Is it cloud-based software companies or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of, we have a sell side and buy side opportunity. Our initial go-to-market is focused on the sell side. And within the sell side, mid-market and enterprise B2B SaaS companies. And we're also getting some traction with like IoT companies. So companies that have lots of distributed endpoints that are generating data that they need to aggregate and contextualize and make sense of. It seems to be a really interesting target profile for us. But yeah, sell side first, buy side's also interesting too.
Okay, gotcha. So you're coming out of stealth mode at this point in time. I was reading the note that was sent to me, but you've already raised $14 million, which is no small chunk of change. What's your job one, if you will, this year in launching and coming out of stealth mode, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. So the company's been in R&D mode for the last close to 2 years, building a platform, a really impressive platform with lots of technology innovation. So this year is really about coming to life as a company with a real robust go-to-market. So launching the company, and we're going through sort of multiple launch phases now, building toward real market presence. So you start seeing we've started to activate our content engine and our communications channels, launching a full-featured website, a general release of our product, which we've pegged to the early June timeframe. So first wide commercial release of MetaCX. So there's sort of this graduated building that's happening as we're starting to sort of wake up as an active go-to-market. And customer success. I mean, we eat our own dog food, so using our product with our customers to make them wildly successful, to build the flywheel from an advocacy perspective. Huge part of what we're doing this year. And also just kind of making it through. Like these are weird times. We're in a pretty fortunate position, and I think we have a resilient value proposition that's timely relative to the challenges that companies have today, but it's not the easiest time to build a company. So this year is really getting our footing for next year as well.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you've got a full plate just in what you described too, coming out of the R&D mode. Are you looking for beta customers, trial customers? Are you in that mode? Do you already have some? I'm just not sure.
We already have commercial. We're already in market commercially. Yeah, so we're definitely post beta. I guess that's considered gamma.
Something like that.
Something like that. We are in market. We have 18 paying customers today. So early days, but not insignificant. We're learning a ton.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and it is an interesting time to be thinking about, launching in a broad sense and trying to build that revenue pipeline, if you will. How are you thinking about it? And how would you, knowing where you came from, which was a rocket ship and not pre-pandemic times to now pandemic times, and trying to do it at the same time? Just curious how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's different. It's certainly not the easiest moment, as I said, but it's also hardly impossible. And there's a couple of reasons why. The first is that sort of life goes on, and so does business, and there are new challenges, and we need to be as relevant as possible to those new challenges. And I think we have a really relevant value proposition that helps companies do a better job at closing new business. Because, if you show up the old way, which is based on the assumption of a pretty healthy deal flow, you're going to be in a much worse position. If you show up with a completely different posture to your customers, selling on the basis of outcomes and putting some skin in the game, shared risk, shared accountability, really adding a degree of transparency and trust to that sales process, it's going to help you win more deals. We think that's really important, particularly now. As companies just have much less deal flow. Top of funnel is just not healthy. And then from a bottom of funnel perspective and a customer retention perspective, being able to prove it, to put data behind the promise and remove the ambiguity around whether customers are deriving value from whatever you're selling is also very relevant to the moment. So while it's definitely not an easy time, nor a particularly good time for many/most companies, there are still plenty of challenges that are both normal run rate challenges for any business at any moment in time, and then also the new challenges presented by this economic climate.
Well, I think I just had my unlock moment as I listened to you talk about that, and I asked that seemingly good question, but maybe a stupid one now that I had this unlock moment in my head, was that there's probably no better time for you to launch MetaCX than right now. Just given the razor sharpness that you can drive through the sales process for your customers.
I think it's a good point. I think it's an optimistic, very hopeful note, and I like it. I think it's mostly true. There's also this other belief that in economically difficult times, there's a couple of things going on. It creates time and space for companies to think differently. So this is the time of transformation. This is the time of thinking about the things that you couldn't get around to when business was robust. It's also a time of thinking about what it's going to look like on the other side. Because my feeling is that this was a bit of a reset, and we're not going back to the way it was. What we would all probably describe as the subscription economy, our belief is that it becomes the performance economy. And if you can't prove your value, you're going to be forever at risk. Because while we will get back to normal, things will feel less unusual than they do today. I think that some of the assumptions, the operating assumptions of business then will not return.
Very good point. It makes me quick aside. I was listening to another podcast, and I can't remember the guy's name for some reason. It'll come to me eventually. But the important part is that he owned restaurants, was an investor in restaurants, but also invested or started or founded, not exactly sure the right term, this software engine for restaurants and hospitality industry called Talk. So anyone that's listening can Google Talk and figure out who I'm talking about and can't remember their name, unfortunately. But it was interesting because Talk had worldwide customers. And as the pandemic was coming to land, if you will, in Asia, they started to see their bookings because they're kind of like a different version of Open Table for restaurants. And so they could see their bookings go from, 95% to zero. And it was just like this tsunami effect. And he does, goes on to describe, what that meant because he's running restaurants as well as the software company. And the pivot that they made in the restaurant business was hugely successful, going to takeout and carry out orders. But then developing that same capability with inside Talk within a week opened up a huge market opportunity for them. And to your point, just about like trying to drive value and keeping your eye on value that you're driving for your customers in spite of what otherwise looks like doom and gloom when everything goes to zero. What's the worth of your software platform? That's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I wish I could remember his name, but Talk is the software platform.
I will check it out. It's almost like an early warning system.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And for him in particular, because he has, the restaurant, which I can't remember either, I think is in Chicago. And it's like one of the most awarded, highest end, like art form type restaurant spaces. So you know that you're going to take a hit when this is coming through. But being able to pivot and then pivot both businesses that he was in, it was phenomenal. But it was all about value, right? Like, how do we, if our software is the next day worthless, how do we drive value creation, and how do we make sure that we're doing that, which is what you guys are helping people solve. Is kind of cool. Well, it's always fun to see what you're up to, and I expect nothing more than success, as you've always demonstrated. So I'm going to keep my eye on MetaCX and where you guys go next.
I really appreciate it, Alan.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do like to do on this show is get to know you behind the microphone. And we know each other a little bit, but listeners don't know you yet. So I thought maybe we can ask a few questions that I like to ask folks. So my first one, which I love, and listeners know this because I say it almost every time I say the question, is there an experience of your past that defines and makes up who you are today?
That's it's a great question. An experience of my past. So maybe this is too personal. So I was kind of like an apathetic student for much of my life. And then I went to college and it clicked. And it clicked that this was sort of a game. Like there was an opportunity to really engage in a process and see how effort led to output and outcomes. And it was sort of this, there was like an elegance to it. And you saw yourself getting better and doing well. And it was fun. It was a whole lot more fun than being disengaged. So I think I sort of learned to, and I've treated my career that way as well, by the way. And it's not raw ambition. It's just, it's more fun to be passionate and engaged than not. And if you can measure your performance against yourself and find the best possible performance that you can achieve, it's actually a really rewarding experience. So I think it's that's probably the best way to think about like what makes me tick based on my early experience.
I love it. I love that example. Well, what advice would you give your younger self if you were starting all over?
Breathe.
Yes. Yeah. That only comes with age.
Exactly. No, I think it wasn't until maybe I was like 40 or 38 or something where I woke up and I said, you know what? It's going to be okay. Like that thing that made you successful the day before will be there the day after. In fact, it only gets stronger in some ways. It's not a depleting resource.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, good. Well, so this next question, we were talking a little bit before, and I may have to give you a pass on the price point, given your passion for something, but because I imagine I know what your answer is going to be. So has there been a impactful purchase of $100 or less in the last 6 to 12 months that you just can't stop talking about?
I racked my brain on this one because the only thing I could think of less than $100 would be a book. Over $100, probably one of the top 5 best things I've ever done is Peloton. It sounds like a total overstatement, but kind of life-changing, like an amazing product, an amazing experience. And it's both a great workout. It's a mood elevator. Like it just puts you in a great frame of mind. Great way to end the day for me. I've gotten fitter. I just love it. They've just really nailed the whole experience. The hardware is great, of course, but also the instructors are just really talented, really engaging. The music is great. They tell you you're crushing it. You believe it.
Are you doing the live or doing the I think they have recording as well, right?
I think I've done 80 something classes since I bought it, and I've never done live, not once.
Okay, interesting. I know people that love it. I thought you were gonna go crazy and like keep going on and on. I was gonna have to cut you off like those Orange Theory people, or like me, if you get me going on CrossFit. Although I'm mourning my box right now, which is what we call our gym.
I should try that. Looks intense.
It's phenomenal. You do need a good coach, otherwise you will hurt yourself. So
I could imagine, and I certainly would.
yeah. Well, all right. 2 more questions. Curious, as a marketer, marketers tend to be kind of students of what's going on around them. Are there any brands, companies, or causes that you're following or you think people should be taking notice of right now?
Right now, like specific to this moment?
Well, it doesn't have to be. No.
2 brands that I love that have always spoken to me. I just think that they're brilliant in what they stand for and or what they've done. First is Yeti. Yeti is just remarkable. I mean, they've taken, starting with a cooler, of course, but then they've targeted multiple other categories. And these have been commodity, low consideration categories that they've fundamentally reinvented. They charge 10x the price point. And for some reason, I buy whatever they put in front of me. I just love it. And I think a part of it is their storytelling and their content marketing is just stunningly good.
That's a good idea. I mean, I've got probably, and I'm drinking out of a Yeti right now, actually.
It cost you $38.
Yeah, well, I didn't buy any of my Yeti, but the thing that it does say is like, I know of the brand. And so when I've gotten these things as gifts, they're valued. Like
You keep it.
yeah, I'm not throwing this tchotchke away, right? Because I know it's really good.
And then Patagonia speaks to me. Just always has. I really, Yvon Chouinard, I think, is a super original guy. I just like what they stand for. I like the aesthetics. I like the quality. Don't love the fact that it's been co-opted by Silicon Valley, but what can you do?
Well, those Yeti and Patagonia go together, right? So maybe it says outdoors.
They both say outdoors. I think Yeti is more, is it fair? Can I say redneck chic?
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. It's like the grown-up Solo cup. Yeah.
Exactly. No, that's it.
Yeah. So, well, last question for you. As a former marketer, you can remember those days only a few weeks ago. What do you feel like is the largest opportunity or threat to marketers today or going forward?
I'm going to be unoriginal and say data for both. It's the opportunity and the threat. It's the threat because in most cases, marketers still wrestle with dirty data. So their ability to use it, the way they want to use it is often constrained. And it's also, and when they can't, it puts them at risk. And it's the opportunity because when they find opportunities to really tap into that data to more effectively target and importantly measure impact and get better, it's a superpower and it gives them a seat at the table.
Awesome. Well, Jake, it's always fun to talk to you.
You too. Yeah, genuinely. Thank you.
I can't wait till the next time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Alan. Really appreciate it.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show.
I love to hear from listeners, and you can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes with links to anything we talk about on any episode. You can also search our archives.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.